What the other children are doing, but Samba Jawan, the Samba the Chibis, Tela Lutusa, Taba Dubel Lange, Argentina, Pova Jeche, Taba Dubel Lange, Argentina, Pova de la Tenche Tabu Coaduba, Lanche Tabu Coaduba, Nigan, Lanche Tabu Coaduba. What then my Umarva? Lanche Tabu Coaduba over there, and the Habas Janga, the Korean about what the legal surgery in that. That Japanese
Bless you. So once again, we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, specifically the section, and when we look at the outline entitled "Training the Mind in the Stage of the Path Shared in Common with Beings of Medium Capacity." When we look at that particular section, there are 4 major headings. The first heading is the mental training. The second training is the measure of the determination to be free. The third category is the dispelling misconceptions. And then the fourth category is ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. So these are the 4 categories. We've gone through the first 3, and now we're currently dealing with category number 4. And when we look at category number 4, ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation, we'll find that there are 2 major headings. First, the kind of life you need in order to halt cyclic existence, or the kind of basis needed to halt cyclic existence. And then category number 2 is the kind of path needed in order to halt cyclic existence. So when we get to that second category, which is where we are, the kind of path needed to halt cyclic existence, you'll find that in the outline there are 3 categories: the certainty of the enumeration of the 3 trainings, the determination of the order of the 3 trainings, and then the nature or the definition of the 3 trainings. So these are the 3 categories, and I'll let everyone know when I do what page we're on.
So we're going to
go over a part of what we went over last week to begin in the great treatise.
The Chibundin Kilaranga la Chinas. What the Casore Habas what the Tejibishi Guris, what the Marva.
The Jeeper Chembo, Gemma Lager, the Caviar.
That don't know what is each angle.
So I think we're on page 342. If I were explaining here the path of persons of medium capacity, I'll let you know if that's not correct. I'm just trying to find it in the Tibetan as well right now.
The Chibundin Kilaranga la Chinas, Chibundin Timel Chibaina, Habasung Chilu, Jebo Gunas,
okay, yeah.
Gunaya, Temares,
Lesso.
Chibundin Tumulan Chitene, Tijinle Chibon Chibares,
Lesso.
They may be Shiro Latuntan, Sanjalabashine, Chilune, Chibichimikoso, Jeba. Chibanju, there's the only Madros, Habasung, Sutin to Madu, Shenet, Latuni, the Chibichimico, Jibu Ungres,
Lesso,
Madros,
Lesso,
then a Sutin Jilaba, Nuduci Juba Shaws, Sutin Jilaba, Nuduci, Nudu Jogis on the Marba, Tela Thomas, Sutin Japan, Sutin. That kind of tradition parent on Sutin Masum Yami Marba, and the Woolma Sutin Jetta Lobby to soon on a Lobby to the Judge of Saji Jedum Marba. That tradition parent on Masum Yami need what they need to what about the rain of the that Jetta Lobby to Nija Dunchu, Woolea, Chinsun, Chijubadan or Tubatal. Chetal Hub is Tunes.
So we'll do. So we are on page 342, and it says, if I were giving here the, let me try that again. If I were explaining here the path of persons of medium capacity alone, I would have to give a lengthy explanation of the three trainings. However, since this is not the case, what Lama Tsongkhapa is stating here is if he was only giving an explanation of, say, the Hinayana teachings or the lesser vehicle teachings, then it would be necessary for him to include at this point a lengthy explanation of the three highest higher trainings, the highest higher training in ethics, concentration, and wisdom. But because this is a text on all three capacities, and this is considered a section that is the stages of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity, Lama Tsongkhapa is stating that he's choosing to explain these trainings in the section on the great scope instead of right now. Except he will be giving a short explanation, which is lengthier at this point than the explanation of concentration and wisdom on the highest higher training in ethics. So here it says, however, since this is not the case, I will explain the trainings in wisdom insight and in mind meditative serenity in the section on persons of great capacity, and will not elaborate at this point. Thus I will briefly discuss the training in ethical discipline here. That's in the beginning, reflect repeatedly on the benefits of ethical discipline and develop enthusiasm for it from the depths of your heart, as the great final Nirvana Sutra states. So here we'll find the benefits of engaging in ethical discipline, and then we find the downfalls of not engaging in ethical discipline explained, and then we find that lengthy 8 categories when we get into the section of explanation in Jayan Sheva's outline. Less so.
지금은 다 동부 안에 메시바 동안주 고녀무 모아 동안주 고바메 동안주 그고 어떤 지게 안에 마구바 동안주 고제 지금은 지정고도 지 고제데 사제 지금은 담부들에 다 담부들만 담부지들 레고도와 안에
the Ditskorimche the Nicha dun the NGK Mambo la the Loma son the Dixon
Kawangulma
the Nicha Dunju the Mambo Yure the Payun Nieme the
Payun Nieme ni peji tabu konglajana da jeta lobi chudmurajana.
Okay, then a lo magu. Okay, yeah. So Rinpoche said that we're going to skip this section where we're dealing with the benefits and the downfalls and move directly to the section where we find the 8 categories, beginning with the 4 causes of an infraction. So we then skip right to where the 8 categories are found, and then this first category will be the 4 causes of an infraction: not knowing the precept, carelessness, disrespect, and various afflictions. So if we turn to page 343, we find that, and then we're just about at the end of page 270 then in the Tibetan. So we're just skipping over that quote from the final Nirvana Sutra and then Nagarjuna and then the tantric text.
자 주진 패서 마음 예민이 되면 라리 주진 도와이 라리 주진 등은 주진 템바 도와데 주진 체와 등에 로스 주진 들라네 아부소나 도와 용그레스 마소나 등에 용그레스 어디 수다금도 글로파이 수다금도 장소마 주진 소나 패요와 마소나 예미 어디 되니도 어디 조산도와
레서
당아도 어디 제달럽이 주진라 제달럽이 주대 땡한테 잘라봐도 싫어 잘라봐니도 집에 심이 거는 그래서 근데 주진이 라봐도 집에 시기스 주진라 제달럽이 주들라 사제 제제
오케이
지금은 다 담보
알레
담보스 동안주 주제데 지금은 지정으로 동안주 주제네 주지는 담부터 메시바도 말봐. 아니 다동화도 그냥이나 그냥 러방가요로. 러방가도 야부시고로다. 그런네나 러바요아래. 그수당 사말 러바요도. 러바도 야부시고로스. 더부 마시나 아니 코 시금에서 때 예바도 용거로다. 메시바 동안 용거레스. 아니 메시비 네부터 가르 네부터 쇼스나. 하자나 예네 시버샤오스. 아니 글롱글하자 아니 그냥글하자 어디서 야베네 시소나 메시바들 에드다데. 타바 드마이 쇼로데게 타바 드르지롤네 나진 아니 하자나 시비 르 아니 하자나 메시바들 네부도 말바. 어디서 온데레.
Okay. Let me log in.
Okay.
So when we just look at those benefits and drawbacks of keeping or not keeping ethical discipline, we find it really summarized in the Sutra of Beloved of Monks, which is actually a Vinaya Sutra specifically written to the fully ordained monk. And it says, the ethical discipline of some leads to pleasure, the ethical discipline of others leads to pain. Those who possess ethical discipline are happy, whereas those who break ethical discipline suffer. So here we find that section kind of summarized that we've already gone through. So Rinpoche said we're going to just go forward. Now, Lama Tsongkhapa previously stated that he will not be explaining the highest higher training in concentration or wisdom in length during this section at this point, because he'll be explaining it later. But he does state that he'll give a short explanation of the highest higher training in ethics. That explanation of the highest higher training in ethics, according to Jayan Sheba, has 8 categories, beginning with this first category, which is right after the intro, where it says, therefore you should also think about the drawbacks of not keeping to ethical discipline and thereby generate great respect for the training. There are 4 causes of an infraction: not knowing the precept, carelessness, disrespect, and various afflictions. So the first is not knowing the precept. So if, for instance, you have a householder vow, you need to know that you have 5 precepts. If you have a fully ordained monk or nun vow, you need to know how many precepts you have. If you have a novice monk or nun vow, you need to know how many precepts you have. So if someone were to ask, posit the antidote for not knowing the precept, you would state, as a remedy for the precept, so you wouldn't state that, you would say, listen to and understand the precepts. So if someone were to say, posit the antidote for not knowing the precepts, you would say, the antidote is listening to and understanding what the precepts are. So if we understand well what the householder vows are, and what the number of them are and what they are, or the fully ordained monk nun or novice monk or nun, then that serves as an antidote to not knowing the precept. So then that gets rid of that first cause of an infraction, not knowing the precepts. So knowing the precepts well is the first antidote. Digson.
And Chimba Inaya, Magawa Jutan, Goa Jutu Yabishimena, and then Magawa Jutu Galo, and Yungrovata, Magawa Jutu Kandai Mungusumena, and Magawa Jutu Yungrovata. What they doju, Magijubu Sudison Bayena, and Magijutu entered the Marbe. What doesn't Davi
So, in the case, this isn't only in the case of those who are vow holders. So, for instance, those who have not gone forth, but are householders, for instance. Not householder vows, just householders. And just as a translator's note, when I'm saying not gone forth, that's the name. Someone who has gone forth is someone who has taken any among those pradamoksha vows, the 7 lifetime pradamoksha vows. So there are those who have not gone forth and who are not vow holders. But for them, this specific advice would be in regards to, for instance, the 10 non-virtues. One needs to engage in the ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtues. So if one doesn't know what the ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtues is, and doesn't know what those 10 non-virtues are, then it isn't possible to keep them. But the antidote for not knowing the 10 non-virtues is gaining the understanding of what those 10 non-virtues are, so one can engage in the ethics which abandons those 10 non-virtues. So in the case of someone who hasn't gone forth, this also applies, because it's necessary to know what the ethics that abandon the 10 non-virtues is. So by knowing that, then you abandon this first cause of not knowing the precept. Digso.
Juba Shibi, Shijin dance, Dolan Juba Shijin dance, Dagan Chujong to Shane Nebala, Zimbi Gonsa Shiba dance, Dagan Sana, Anthony Jen, Digu Marina Nebal Zeba, the Gonsa Shiba, one Anthony Jen, Chudon Genegres, the Nidl Gonsa Shiba Logres. That was Natus Jena Jing Aldoja Logresana, Jim had one Hane. Zembi Cheyo Basa, Musa Che, Nyanshuji Namila, Deba Magoa Sabaina, Tin Jebatil Naming and Sunda Chiwala Suba. Gine, Pakun was Sula Loba Shawos, and Pa maybe Nebuto Ting, but Pa maybe Nebune, Landu Jimena, Majibi, Chamba dance, Tamagaju Ponjarwa. Magajumu Tuti the Lanja Marbe, Gawaju the Lanja Che, Lam, Magaju Tojaris, Ponja, Landro, Magaju Ponja in Batan, Gawaju Lanja in Batukalo, Yabishiba Jen, Majiba Gures, Landu Jemena, Majibi Tembatans, Magaju the Gawaju to Kangalo Yabishine, to Majiba Jibitamba Gures. And the church to Lu is on the le, Magitu Mundo, Tajiji, Dojin, Lenya Kala, Yu Shebi, Shijin Gugles, Shijin, that what the Goa Yungudu, Mago Yungudu, Tatic and Sanlu, the Shijin Lagumbre, Shijin Dan, the name to Jena and Digmarina Musa Sheba Dan, Nathan Chudon Gated Jambe, Musa Sheba. Jing al Doja Logan Zebaina, Chiba, Neshu Minala, Deba Mago, Chusabaina, and T. Naming as soon to Chivala. Gine, Pakum was Lobos, what about the Redua? Tachimba in a Rajun, the Jibaro, the Jiba Santa. Yeah.
So, as a householder, a non-vow holder, one has to think in the same way as someone who has gone forth with respect to engaging in ethical behavior, because there are those karmic consequences to behaviors no matter what. So one then has to, even as a householder, adopt these attitudes. So here, the next is a remedy for which is called carelessness. So it says, as a remedy for carelessness, train an attitude such as mindfulness, which does not forget which ends to adopt and which to cast aside. Vigilance, which immediately examines the three doors of body, speech, and mind, and understands the right or wrong in which you are engaged. Shame, which shuns faults committed with respect to oneself or the teaching. and embarrassment which shuns wrongdoing and thinks others will criticize me. So when we look at this in terms of a householder, in terms of the ethics which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, so if it says, as a remedy for carelessness, train an attitude such as mindfulness, which is not forget which ends to adopt and which to cast aside. So one needs to know what behaviors to engage in with regards to non-virtue and virtue. So knowing what the 10 non-virtues are allows you to know what to abandon. So the abandonments are the 10 non-virtues. So one needs to know what the abandonments are. One needs to know what the antidote is to the abandonments. So first, by knowing what the abandonments are, one knows what to cast aside. By knowing what the ethics are, which are, in this case, the ethics which abandon the 10 non-virtuous activities, one knows what to adopt. So if then one knows the precepts and then is mindful about what one has learned, and one has learned what to engage in and what not to engage in, then this serves as an antidote to carelessness. And it says, vigilance, which immediately examines the 3 doors of the body, speech, and mind, and understands the right or wrong in which you are engaged. So knowing what to adopt and what to discard, what the abandonments are, what the activities are that one should engage in, and what the remedies are in order to get rid of the abandonments. So it says, you know what the 3 doors of body, speech, and mind. So one engages in these 10 non-virtues through the body, speech, and mind, and one actively abandons these 10 non-virtues through the body, speech, and mind. So one is abandoning through body, speech, and mind, as well as adopting through body, speech, and mind. So one is being mindful and constantly examining this. And then there are 2, I'm sorry, I really need a drink of some sort. There are 2, thank you so much. There are 2 types of emotions that arise when one is being mindful and thinking of behavior. First, there is shame. Shame is in regard to oneself and thinking about the consequences and so forth, knowing that the lower realms will be a result of non-virtuous behavior. Thank you so much. And also, knowing what has been taught in the Dharma, and then recognizing if one is acting mutually exclusive with the Dharma, then one is engaging in what he or she shouldn't, and then feeling a sense of wrong from one's own side is shame. Now, if one then worries what others will think because of this behavior, then this is embarrassment. So it says, shame which shuns faults committed with respect to oneself or the teaching. So this is meaning, the way what this really reads as is, shame is how oneself feels about faults committed, and then behaviors that are mutually exclusive with the teaching. So Rinpoche made it clear that mutual exclusion with the teaching. So, or the teaching, that means behavior that's mutually exclusive with the teaching. So, and then it says, which shuns faults committed with respect to oneself or the teaching. Embarrassment, which shuns wrongdoing and thinks others will criticize me. Then Rinpoche, the Mila Jine Pakupa Sola Lapo De Lausen. Thing is Shigadu Gemma de Lay. Okay. In trepidation, which fears the future karmic, fruition of wrongdoing. So that ends that section, and one fears the lower realms of cyclic existence, which will be a result of non-virtue. One knows non-virtue leads to suffering, and virtue leads to happiness. And this trepidation is a fear of what non-virtue will bring. Dixon.
What about Jetta Sumba Magubi Sumba the Magubi de Tumba Di Jebata Samba Shoba Nala Koba Shavos Tumala Maguba Di Jeba Sanji Jebata Jebala Bagubata True Samba Shoba Nala Magubas Dama Prende Marbe.
Bless you.
Oh, this will Maguba the Chimbala Sigre, Rajun La Sigro.
Bless you.
Chimba the Rajunika Tinia to go wood.
Bless you.
Tumba the tea, Jebata Samba Shoba Nala Kuba Shavos Sanji Kuba Jebaina Maguba entered out.
Bless you.
Tea Jebala Kuba Jebaina Jebala Maguba entered in the Mara.
Bless you.
Samba Shoba Kuba Jena Maguba Yabundura. What to Lelabundua.
Bless you.
Yeah.
And this next section deals with respect and disrespect. And this applies to someone who has gone forth, as well as someone who is just a householder and has not gone forth. Rinpoche said this is quite easy to understand. As a remedy for disrespect, have respect for the teacher, his rules, and your fellow practitioners. So here, the remedy for disrespect is basically generating respect by thinking about the teacher, what the teacher has taught to engage in and what to abandon. And then it says, and your fellow practitioners. And this refers to Dharma friends. So the remedy or antidote for disrespect is generating respect. Dixon.
Bless
you.
Nyomu Moy never the Rajun in the Cheba in the Garasanta Urusana, Jula Tates, Raju in the Cheba in the Susu Jule, and then Nyomu Kan Shechewa, Docha Shechewa ina, Mudubu Goya, Kondu Shechewa ina, Shamba Goya, and then the Moon Shechewa ina, Tendi Goya, what the Chesum de Samarba, Bene, Tenos, what about the Jibadro? Yeah.
And then number 4, fourth cause of an infraction is various afflictions. So it says, as a remedy for various afflictions, examine your mind and energetically apply the remedies for whatever afflictions predominate. So here, this again applies to one who has gone forth or one who has not gone forth, a householder, an ordinary being. So as a remedy for various afflictions, examine your mind and apply remedies for whatever afflictions predominate. So if when we look at in terms of the 3 poisons, every affliction has its own antidote, has a specific antidote. So the 3 poisons are attachment, hatred, and ignorance or delusion. So if the attachment predominates, then meditation upon ugliness or impurity becomes the antidote. If hatred or anger predominates, then meditation upon love becomes the antidote. If ignorance or delusion predominates, then meditation upon dependent origination serves as an antidote. So each of the afflictions has their own individual antidote, and one needs to apply the antidotes to whatever afflictions predominate, whatever are the strongest. Those are the afflictions that are dealt with first. So that's what is meant by this 4th category.
So
these 4 fall into the first category of Jayan Sheba's outline. Less so. So now we get into category number 2 in Jayan Sheba's text. Less so.
Shamarong Honjun Shawasa. Cheba Tamo. This is nearby Chujun Red, that the Zokalo Mason and Jigre, Sanji Jeba Chujun and the Guya Marsambana, on what the Chisu Jeba Ina, and what the Loa Lidamana Chag in Yakayuris, Loa Lidamate, and Kushindu Bana. And Lully Lungul Shinu Yakin, what cook what the 산지가 신jem 주사 네바 주중에서 가르쳐 거서는 콜론라는 제바 인지로 되게 죄시발라 때는 롤지네 롱골 신도여 기지바 어디 제바 참도로 서서 맞이는 어떤 유아니 가요아래서 때는 도송랬다 네바 때다 멤베바 ndzanle geya 네바 중원여도 산에스 때네 어디 산지 네바 추중되는 몸이요로 네 폼바제 라마 주송 본동 소초 네지 자던 네 바지바 고조 소샤제 네지 자던 주니 안에 원예제도 동아대 추중으로 추중 어디는 신바라서 어떠서 원도서 동아 추중으로 게나 중요 말이 안에 총원향도 산에스 제발라 바양소 주바 제발라 바양소 주반 동행 바지 투데스 제발라 바양소 주네 제바이나 어때 동행 용그레스 놀로 얼린다 만나지 차냐 가요레스 바양소 바지 투데 론나지레스 론나지를 송도스다 강지 덤바 토지 전제 덤발라 영화세지 존재 다시바스 춘춘도서 어때 가요 말 소지게 도서 다가서 춘춘세 도서 맞추서 라우다르스 최소 제바이나 영화세지 존재 다시바 때네 tel에 동해 정화도스 어때 최소 전에 동안 춘춘도서 바한제바이나 안 동해 용그레스 존재 제베 아미 체냐진스 존재 제베 아미 체냐진스 대다 존재 아미 세스간데 사야가 신지를 서그레스 존재서 디탈 신도서 만도아 존재 제베 아미 체냐진스 다 example 전달을 가르고 전달을 네 손지기 제바 조중도서 그걸로 존재 남지 어떻게나 되는 아미 체 주요 같은 냥 도와 냥데 냐가요레스 아미 체냐진스 이르바 어디다나 딩자마르바 손세 다 내지 내바 주중을 봐야 제네 손지기 다가즈레선 제바이나 아니 손지 제바던 게네 도알는 그레스 아미 체냐 수수기 도와뉴아들 네 원냥한다 그레스 아미 체냐진 달라레 자비 체체야 데나 랭가 체바 투면 조로스 자부기 제바 체바드네나 더 워트빌랜드 시든지 제바이나 안 체바 투면 세바 요로다 투비 칼룬 주민다시나 돈돈제 얼린달로진스 셰송비셔스 투비 칼룬 레테네 바스 최소진 대바이나 노어때 냐손 제그레스 로 얼린달로 나제레스 얼린달로진스 셰송비셔스 어때 니바트바트인사
So now we get into number 2. And number 2 deals with a wrong way of thinking, which is thinking that one is only engaged in a little non-virtue or made a small transgression. So it's nothing to worry about, it's okay. So this number 2 addresses that wrong way of thinking. Rinpoche, shoot the trunk of Mambo Lasun, the Jadan, Juni, the Dundagari, Garshine.
That the Galong Tonga, Pamba Je, Lama Chusun, and Ponton Soncho, Bajiba Gocho, Soja Je, Nije Jatan Chuni, Galon Chinya, Jangachu Sasons. What that's the Lama Sasun.
Okay, 253. Then Sawa. The Je, Jusum, Sunju, Guju. The
Pamba Je, Lama Chusun, Ponton Soncho, Bajiba Gocho, Soja Je, Nije Jatan Chuni, Galong Chin, Lanya Langaro, Guinea Langaro. What then the Tatus of Kalama Mala, the language? Galung Lajas Laja.
Okay. So when we look at the advices for a fully ordained monk, there are 253, and we find them in, Rinpoche was explaining the sets of there 4, 13, 30, 90, 112, And it basically, these all add up to 253 vows. So it's a large number of vows, root vows at the beginning and then secondary vows. So a large number of secondary vows that one needs to keep. But all of them are important because not keeping them leads to suffering. So here, we'll just read. Those who fail to make an effort in this way, who follow the rules in a lax fashion, thinking that even though they have transgressed, it is merely a small fault, will gain only suffering. For, as the exegesis of discipline says, those who take lightly and slightly transgress the teaching of the compassionate teacher, thereby come under the power of suffering. Just as one who cuts a grove of small bamboo and spoils a whole grove of mango, here, those who transgress the king's pronouncements would not be punished for a few such transgressions. But were they to transgress improperly the edicts of the sage, they would become animals, as did the Naga Alapatra. So here, this is saying that if one were to just cut a small amount of something out of a field, so it's still not extremely clear what this line means, and it's still not 100% clear. But the meaning is that if one were to just take a small amount of mango, for instance, it may not be punished by the king. So doing something very small may not result in a large punishment by a king. But if someone engages in a small amount of non-virtue, then this could lead to a very grave amount of suffering, a very great result or consequence in the future. So then the example of the Naga Alapatra is given. And this was a story of a meditator who meditated, and every time he would get up to go outside of his cell, meditation cell, there was a tree that he would hit his head on. So he became angry and cut it down one day so he wouldn't hit his head every time he walked out of his meditation cell. And as a result of this behavior, the anger and then the cutting of the tree, as a note, cutting a tree breaks a monk's vow. As a result of this, he was born as a Naga, and when he in the Naga realm, he had a tree growing out of his head. So this is the story of Alapatra, and you can see that just the small, which seemed to be a small misdeed of cutting a tree down, resulted in a very large karmic consequence in this case. So this is the story that Buddha told.
네 추진냐보다 초가냐보다 초가냐보 인다야 니월 지금 말이스 룰을 치는 거です. 어떻습니까? 인사.
Oh, that's so.
담을 로사로다.
And previously we went over when we were dealing with karma and its consequences. We found the story of the Naga realm and why those Nagas who were able to hold on to the faith. Let me try this again. The story previously of the Naga realm and why there were such a large number of Nagas at the time. And the explanation of it was that those beings who were previously practitioners of the Buddha Dharma, who engaged in non-virtuous deeds, but still kept their faith in the karma and its results and so forth, were not born in the hell realms or hungry ghosts. They were actually born as animals, as Nagas, because they kept that one bit of discipline, which was faith in the teachings. So this is very similar to that, where we find this anger results in in the cutting of the tree, doesn't give rise to this rebirth in the hell realms. It gives rise to this Naga rebirth. And we can validate it and understand it by looking at that previous quote where we see that one who keeps that faith but engages in non-virtue may not be born into those lower realms which you would normally think when you match the behavior and consequences because of that faith that was still present. Even if they, it says, even if they lapsed in the three, which was rituals, vows, I could find it, and it would be right here. But there's basically, if they transgress vows, but still keep the faith in the Buddha Dharma, then this creates an experience which is a lesser suffering than would normally be thought of because of the power of that faith.
what the Java to what the Shenmo Lul Jinamandua. Sutin Yang the Lul Jinamando. What the Katamal Jishin.
So previously, so previously, when we looked at it's the question of the Naga kings of the ocean. So previously, when we looked at this, we saw that they had lapsed in ethical discipline, rituals, and livelihood, but they had kept philosophical view. There was a time, when we look at what the story is, there was a time when there were a large amount of Nagas in the world, and it seemed like there were limitless numbers. It says their numbers had no limit. What's the reason for this? Because there was a point in time previously where it didn't seem like there were any Nagas. And the explanation is that there were those who had gone forth into discipline, renounced the world, and went forth into discipline. So that word "went forth" is the rapjung, going forth, which means they're holders of the pradamokshas. So there are these beings who previously went forth, but they weren't perfect in their rituals, in their livelihood or ethical discipline. But still their view was straight. It says so. They were not born among the living beings of hells. Because of this, they were, when they died, reborn in places where Nagas are born. So a large amount of people were ordained and went forth. They couldn't keep their ethics, their rituals, or their livelihood. Their ethics, their specific words are used here. I want to use them properly. Ethical discipline, rituals, and livelihood, okay, so I was correct, had lapsed, but they held on to their philosophical view. So they were born as Nagas instead of hell realm beings. So we can kind of connect these two stories and see the common theme here, where this practitioner became angry, cut a tree, and was born as a Naga.
And never the Magoba to Ketukuba in the Nubusha Shadan Jagures. They you now Yandong Magoba and Beijings and the Magijo Magubala, Chimba in Nanda, Rajun in Nanda, Magijo Magoba and Beigures, Beijing, Jala Kunaya, Magijo Lesonaya, Kuba Inaya, and the Jimanyaba, Munjuba, and the Tuanta, Deba Shedula. Cheta somba tar beba shawos tonwa shi jibisu ane trabata ane ina sujun suya tenre marba nyabu toji tsanu kone sujun suba ina deba tagu yirmatu nyabu toji masana deba takali kabi injirota chimba sulu sujun suya yo marete nyabu toji tsanu kone shadan chiya yoro wate shadan chiya sundu kore tate deba shijula Nebutoji Tonguna, Deba Shijula, Cheta Sombat and Beba Shawos, Sambi Shubale, Sabalan Tembasha, Telanin and Atensha, Shen and Lawa Majashin, Shen upon Majashin, Suki Shen, Shimeja, 大的某个主部的我的苏格乡西美家某个主部出这些西呢这个嘛的大都那点那把cha多了就把的写当时出这样的把这边都来格隆达苏当这些说完来也是格隆达苏当这些说的奥子的是苏当这里说吧那奥子的那出这样些边的嘛呢就像个是呢这些写的些呢苏当这些写云呢就的你测试吧就就是测试吧上的嘛都该有嘛的是出这样些边呢就摸着家有吧都人当这些多不的那么东西吧要是用就说写单词的记得就是写单词的记得送吧带着苏当对都送小屋我都把记住下那么的
小屋 okay
这是么多那么的
This Sumba?
我都送吧的送吧
Okay. So now we get into number 3, and that deals with if you have engaged in non-virtuous activity, it's necessary to apply an antidote immediately or apply an opponent to that non-virtuous activity. And in the case of those who have gone forth, in the case of monks or nuns, we have sojung, which is an opportunity to repair any vows that are broken. But then there are those householders who may not hold vows. And in their case, one has rituals such as the 4 opponent powers to purify misdeeds that one is engaged in. So there's always some sort of antidote which can be applied when one engages in non-virtue, whether it is breaking some sort of a vow or just engaging in misdeeds that are in common with just in common misdeeds. And as a note, that means those misdeeds that apply to everyone. Okay. So this is category number 3 in Jayan Sheba's outline. Therefore, strive not to be polluted by faults and infractions. However, if you should become polluted by these, do not heedlessly ignore such sins and infractions, but strive to redress them in accordance with the Buddha's teaching. As the sutra requested by Brahma says, rely upon the trainings, undertake them earnestly from the heart, do not give them up later, or break them even to save your life. Always maintain them diligently and engage in discipline. Moreover, as the Buddha decreed in the Sutra on having pure discipline, ethical discipline, the Sila Samyakta Sutra, using reasons you should keep your ethical discipline, even at the risk of your life. O monks, to lose your life and die is excellent, but to ruin and lose your ethical discipline is not. So, to lose your life and die having ethical discipline is okay, is how it should read. But to ruin and lose your ethical discipline is not. Why? Losing your life and dying expends only the lifespan of this rebirth. But if you ruin and lose your ethical discipline, you will experience a great downfall, separating from your lineage and giving up happiness over 10 million lifetimes. So here the Buddha is stating that it's not saying it's excellent to lose your life and die. It's saying that losing your life and dying while a holder of ethical discipline is okay, but I asked Rinpoche before. It's saying is okay, it's good. It's not the word excellent. It's okay, it's good. But to lose your ethical discipline isn't, because when you just lose your life, it's just one short lifespan that's been cut. But you lose your ethical discipline, it's your entire lineage that is cut. Your happiness over 10 million lifetimes that is cut. 10 million lifetimes such as the lifetime you just ended. So 10 million of those will be suffering. So one can see how much graver a consequence it is to give up ethical discipline than just dying. So it says, you should think, if this need to keep my ethical discipline at all costs were not the case, then shaving off my hair and donning monastic robes was pointless. Digsung.
This one. Okay,
We'll take a short break. Be right back.
Roll on.
Action.
That what the girls pies that do this one do. Shooting at about the Bendole, Glon Tasuto to show and lie, shooting Yanship into the Mayeno. The G. Shina, Jusenka Resana, Sudan Show and there. Sending Jawasip and Juji, shooting Yanshi Shibe, no, the Tatin would be the same. Shibe, ne, Joe Mota Jayabato, Retan the Abbot, number 2 German Yasu Joro. She danced and cheated. Katsawa Taras Jeremiah Watige, down the Tangdosita. That Chujin, what the Chudin Yabagun churches and then digger, Gutu churches and then digger, and the Guinean churches and then digger, Chudin Yabachimba churches and the Chev Marota, Chudin Yabagun church, Joe Mota Jayabato, Ritan Tashin, Dindu Ritan Tashin, Latame, Yomaris, Dindu Ritan Tashin, and Ridante, Joe Mota Jayabato, Ridante, the Waponte, and Tonga Champions on Joros, Tonga Champions on Jute, main beaches, Sudichi main beaches, Sudichi glowing beach, what the Kunan is a mother, Buddhism. The Buddhism dance a dua, Tanzit and Chit, the Katsawa Taras, so not do the song Shaw.
So, when we look at this quote from the Sutra on having pure ethical discipline, we see that there's a correct sign being posited here. So it says that where it says why means that there's going to be a proof or a sign being presented to show, to back up the statement that ruining and losing your ethical discipline is really a problem, whereas just dying when you've been ethical, it isn't really. So why is that? So if one wants to say, what's the reason for that? Well, losing your life and dying expends only the lifespan of this rebirth. But if you ruin and lose your ethical discipline, you will experience a great downfall, separating from your lineage and giving up happiness over 10 million lifetimes. So here we find the proof to back up the fact that losing your ethical discipline is much, much greater, much worse than just dying. This is proven then by Geshe Rinpoche, proven by the Buddha in this statement.
Nandandula, Himbun du Shijin, Jun dan Palam, Shinda Nalacha, Kala Labi, Nade Mabana, Tadaki ni Chishan Gute, Sheson Vishero, what about Sumba? What the college Lu no Jilajana?
And then still we're in number 3. You should think if this need to keep my ethical discipline at all costs were not the case, then shaving off my hair and donning monastic robes was pointless. For as the King of Concentration Sutra says, after you have renounced the world and gone forth into the Buddhist teachings, you engage in sinful actions and attach to mounts, oxen, and chariots, have the idea that wealth and grain are essential. Why did you make no effort to train in anything? Why did you who make no effort to train in anything bother to shave your heads?
On this man.
Dixon.
That Jabba then Mare, that Tujimasuna call to Mares.
Less so.
Then do you call to and dones? Do you call the Kudon and to and done? Tabi don't chat and draw alas. Tabatun done, Tabi don't chat and draw ala. Shooting Google Matu, shooting Kamba Mena, Rutu Mares.
Less so.
Shooting Kamba Yana ne. Rumaniba Mazes, and a call high on questions, and a call high on question, Dogenaji, Jumba Putan Jete, Jumba Putan Jete, Dingen Jabule, Meji Chungun Mombe Razines, Meji Chungun Kumanama to Sukine, Sawan Debes, and Kushine, Drubaina, and Kukamaman Drutu Maravata. Joan Debe, Trishin, Rutana, T. Gambe, Jumanus, Kamaman and Rutu Meroda, and Chungun Targete, the Zon Jumbataras, Kama Drama Tutan, and the Koma to Sonjun, Kuldubutan Rota, Jumbatara, the Jin Sitting Yabe, Mobi Me, and then Duji Tale, Joan de Major called, and then Sitting Yabe, Mobi Mate, called during the body you are there, could shooting Kamba member in Sitting Yabe, they are Ruminus, Kuidon Rutu Mares. Naya dunga, gai dunga, chi dunga, dagi, shi dun jung, shi song soos, whatever the jiba.
Now we get into number 4. You who seek to escape from cyclic existence, the composite, and to reach the city of liberation will not succeed if the feet of your ethical discipline are unsteady. Not only that, you will return again to cyclic existence and be destroyed by suffering. The Buddha spoke of this with an example in the King of Concentration Sutra. So here, if one wants to go anywhere, it's necessary to have the feet to do the going. So if one wants to walk, if we're looking specifically at walking somewhere in this case, if one wants to walk somewhere, it's necessary to have feet to go. Likewise here, ethical discipline is being compared to those feet that are necessary to go somewhere. And in this case, we're speaking of achieving the state of liberation, going to the state of liberation. Ethical discipline are like the feet needed to go to. Here it's the city of liberation. It says, if you who seek to escape cyclic existence and to reach liberation have to have this ethical discipline as the foundation. So it's like the feet that walk towards something. It's that indispensable. And then this example is given where it says, when a man attacked by a gang of robbers, he tried to escape because he wished to live, but when he set out, his feet could not move or run, and so the robbers caught and subdued him. So it's comparing that to a person who engages in non-virtue, someone who doesn't engage in ethical discipline. It's saying that, like the person who couldn't run away from the thieves, someone who is confused and doesn't keep their ethical discipline can't run away from the sufferings of cyclic existence. Because one is bound to cyclic existence by the lack of ethical discipline. So one has to endure the suffering of birth, the suffering of aging, the suffering of sickness, the suffering of death, and has no choice whatsoever. I think it stops right there. Yeah, it stops right there. Decent. long nip. Tingzi Jalpo, then the long ni Tingzi Jalpo long ni Kanga la sen.
Tingzi Jabule, Meji Chugum Takante,
Shiloka Sum.
Example Jatro, example. Meji Kuma Moboki, Kotsine, Ko, Trukajina, Kama Trutuma.
Lasso.
Ne, so on debe, Rotana, T. Kamba, Drushi Jumanus, Chungu Taki. Tuzun Jumbatara example, Tejin to shooting Yabi, Mobi must shooting Mobi mother, Tabatu, Deba Euro. Deba Euro, the shooting as on Tabatu Mares, Ne shooting Yabi, Teon, Dominu, Ne Kuala Kudigris, Nighting a cheat and a guide, Taki Jung, Shazon sauce, what about the Maraba?
Then a do delay. Jimba Japo. Okay, so then. Okay, two chaina. So that where I just ended, that ends number 4. and what Rinpoche just went over, if you're wondering why I'm not translating a lot, it's the same. I just wanted to clarify where 4 and 5 break, start and stop. So that ends number 4, as is destroyed by illness, old age, and death. And then number 5 starts where it says, therefore, as this sutra says. So that begins number 5. And this is a great example. Lama.
Soma to be to such ayores, Mabajoro, she somba terrors, Guinea Sumbi, Labi Jengayon, Zuba, Soma, Gluya Meba, Sumbi, Tunder, Habala Zomba, Shirapenchures, Habayan, Jebuchis, and then what the Gawachu and the Masaba, Jebuchi Yungres, Chi and Beba Shade, do the nearly thing in the job in Jerwa. Keba Shiva Gangi Shenye Do, Tanyi Senji, Sedang Kuna Dan, Keba Shiva Gangi Tenye Do, Keba Shiva Gangi Shenye So De, Chu Ganga Ki Shema Ki Chanda Nyabi, Keba Sila Umarbe. Keba Shiva Gangi, Chu Gangi Shema Ki Chanda Nyabi, Chanda Tenye Do, Gangi Shemi Chanda Nyato, Tanyi Senji, and the Say Chubambuya, Jimbatanya, Kun Chubambuya, Jimbatanya, Du Jimbatanya, Chubambuya, Paden, Mamatan, Chima Yi, Sanji Shiva Tatu, ne Rendushis, and Rendushi, Kangi Tanchu Rado, Jibatan, Deshi Tambangaba Jubitse, Ninsentone Laba Jishueba, Sunan de Teyu, Shirapa, Sheson Bisharos, what the big Kishimunde, Tinsang Tuso, Tengasu, and Hama Keba Zombie Tuso, and Keba Shiva Kangi, Shiming Chanda Nyato, and the Tangi Sensi Set on Kuntan, Dudan Padentan, Mami Tiwa Yi, and the Sanji Shiva Tatil Chubambu, Rendushe, Kangi Tanchu, Rodin Jibatan, Deshi Tambangaba Jubisis, Sanji Tamba Manyabi Tuso, and Ninsentone Labachi Shubas, Ninsutun Labachi Shubayina, Sonat and the Tele, Shirab, Hama Tele, Shirab Jabicha, what is, Shesons what they have.
So number 5, I set forth trainings for householders wearing secular clothing. At that time, these monks did not even have even these trainings. So here it's stating that during this time, the monks weren't even able to hold the 5 householder vows that the Buddha set forth. It says, the Buddha says that in these times, when even monks do not completely maintain the 5 fundamental trainings he taught to lay practitioners, effort in the trainings has an even greater fruit. Therefore, you should strive to maintain the trainings, the same sutra says. For 10 million eons, as many as there are grains, sands in the Ganges, I serve with the pure mind, food and drink, umbrellas, banners, and procession of lamps to 10 quadrillion Buddhas. So much greater is the merit of whoever practices a single training night and day at a time when the sublime teaching is perishing and the Sagata's teaching is coming to an end. So this is speaking of degenerate times, which we were in, and it's speaking of a time they were in, it was degenerate, and it's stating that during a degenerate time, there's much more virtue created by holding vows. Because it's less likely during that time to be able to hold vows. So because it's so much harder for an individual during that time to be a vow holder, to follow ethical discipline, the benefit of doing so is much greater. The virtue created because of the difficulty is much, much greater. So here it's saying that the merit created by just holding even those 5 vows during this degenerate time is greater than being able to offer everything one could ever imagine to 10 quadrillion Buddhas. So it says, so much greater is the merit of whoever practices a single training night and day. So here a training, an ethical training. So someone who engages in one higher training in ethics is, during a degenerate time, has created more virtue than someone who, during a non-degenerate time, offered food, drink, umbrellas, banners, processions of lamps to 10 quadrillion Buddhas. So it's showing how beneficial holding on to ethical discipline is, and what the results are, and that the results are very great during this degenerate time. Dig Sung Rinpoche. So during this degenerate time that we're in now, if we make prostrations, if we make offerings, if we engage in generosity, then it's a great benefit. It's very beneficial. And so if you can read this again and again and look at these signs over and over, you'll understand. It'll almost like it solidifies in your mind. You get it. We went over this before.
Yeah.
So now we get to number 6.
시주비 추세네스 동아촌에 가요 말에 네 시주는 지그레스 추세네 도사와던 다데스 도사와다브레스 샴바 생거대 인도레 샴바 시민스 시민이 나자바 타말라서 나자바 타마 다디상의 뒤서는 말베다 나자바 타말라 샤주선바 친나네바 당스 샤세 친바 두두 샤주선바와 샤주선바 친나네바 당 로도 좀 같이 데서도 스타 대다근데게지 디빌레네 네바샤비 말르바 다반주로 시스신스 디빌레도 샤단제게나 가다다 노레스 시스신 대다 디방원도 데방원반도 샤와 뭐반도 시네 양샤바샤오시 동안 하반진바시진스 시동반진바네 메지바 다 용안주데스 다 동안 워티산 다거서 샤도마지게 되는 몸이 용거레스 워트스 녀가르 손데사데 안에 시민이 뒤 나자바 타마티상 주저는 말베 타마라 샤세 샤주 선바진나네 바당스 샤주 선바된도아 샤주 선바진나네 바당 로도 좀 같이 느끼지서 느데서도스다 디빌레네 네바샤베 말르반 제반주로 셰스신 디빌레드 샤단지게나 강가타는 그래스 서도스 다다 디바 뭐바른 되셔와 뭐반 되시네 양 샤바샤오시 동안 하반진 바시진 시동반 제반의 메제바스 시동반량 말했다 야 메제바타 중앙주대 어떤 손에 왔대 도마말랭 시동반말랭 같은 요아레스 대단히 치일에 제노시 가마데스 chi le jen chiwa yang kanshi na date puna dosa yu Middletown rawa chi tuishi ne loba tunga na so roa jua yin no sa chi tuiso ne ngai song song chiwa la so ba wo tenen rugres she dan shamba singi dai shamba pabi ane she dan sa teyan tama tin bare
Imajra, the Shamba.
singi dai ndo tin singi dai ndo
The Nyamdu.
ane shamba sa pabi chu do wandala doji shawanda da puna sabi ji cheta jeba sabi ji cheta jeba dale dawa sheba ane gelung ge jeba dawa sheba genyen ge jeba dawa sheba ane katu chimba jena magiju dawa sheba tende kuji yoro da dawa sheba yembe cheja ge tosawa da tosawa majawus shesun bisheres
Then it's
what about the
Drupa.
shubare
Okay, so now this will all be number 6. Furthermore, you might think that even were you to incur an infraction, you could confess it afterwards. However, in this case, you lack an attitude of restraint that prevents you from committing the action again. So engaging in this infraction is like eating poison and telling yourself that you could always take the antidote later. For as the lion's roar of Maitreya Sutra, Maitreya Maha Simha Nada Sutra states, Maitreya in the future, in the final 500-year period of the teaching, certain renunciates and householder bodhisattvas will claim that sinful karma is completely extinguished through confessing the fault. They will disclose the infraction, saying, after we have become involved in sin, we will confess it. But they will not restrain themselves from doing it again. I tell you that they possess fatal karma. What do I mean by fatal? For example, it is like people who ingest poison. They create their time of death and then end up in a misguided descent into a miserable realm. Maitreya and also Maitreya, what I call poison in the noble teachings of the discipline, is transgressing the fundamental trainings as I have prescribed them. Therefore, do not eat such poison. So here it's saying that the non-virtuous deeds are poison. Ethical discipline is not. It leads to happiness. So one should not ingest poison thinking that, oh, well, I can just take the antidote later. It'll be fine. And one wouldn't do that with normal poison. And when we compare misdeeds to poison, it's very similar. So why would we then think that we could just take the antidote to these misdeeds later and that it's okay? And the problem with this is that when we're thinking in these terms, we don't have this commitment to not engage in it in the future. So we are missing a component of the purification.
다 듄바 라중 하베장 투송 고바서 돈 듄바 드나마 듄바 들 사지 지지도
Now we get to number 7, and then there are 4 categories in 7.
듄바 도데 라중 하베장 어디 추진송 고레스 대가 도스 다 듄바 드나마 호텔 드네 사지 지지도 장지베 아 듄바 대답이 추지 송안에 수다지 돈데이나 하발라양 자와 인데사 수다지 돈데이나 하바이나요 때 송구레스 자와 인데 본상 주비 주레스 자와가 수수 타바이 네 추진나다 노말르레 하바 침비 따도 추가봉 하만은 여서 나와서 하바 짐바 쪽에 침비 따두스 봉고 말마도 이제 그런 거 참아 송고레스 침비 따다 침비 따고 침바 인상 침비 따 봉야 가요 말보다 침비 레카나부터 봉야요 말레스 레마두제 그런 거 강가로 하바 짐바가 송고레스 하만나데 용소 랑와샤 시가바 침베장 러종 따다 따지고다 레지 추가다 제바 다지고 다 침박을 돌고 가지고로 또 침박 인자 안에 침박을 돌고 그런 거로다. 이 조가다 침박 내가 제요로 제가 제장서 제장 제장이 참가이 제장이 참가이 마도 네 가바라 좀 송바다지 가바 침배가 송고레스 가지 마도 도안에 송바지 샤고바 송나스 가바라 좀라 펴치고 가바 침배 송고나 가바라 좀 송고바 계셔가요 말에 송고레스 송고레스와 다 한루비 싸와야 수진이데 본상 주발레스 what dumba nibat mer dumba 담아듯이 nibat 는 한루비 싸와야 네 수진이데 본상 주발레스 하제 싸와 담보 수진데스 하제 싸와 담보 수진데스 tene zunru tane zoba dans zawa churinje tene zunru je zoba shinru to subi feshi le de doa jawala teba shachu sen ane sanga tane lelo meba o sanga tane sanga ta lelo meba cheta mawa renchen duden ba 제가 뭐 이제 düne 봐. 교화 매봐. 조금 도와시. 대신 하바 연라 데 듄타스 덴바 쥐나 덴바 쥐나 디번 도와시스. 연라 듄부터 덴바이나 수진지 되는 가래로 저 너무 수진다 tene zunru dan, zoba dan, yawala teba dan, shanchu ki senje, sanga dan, lelu meba dundu rendwa. Wate dunbu nyalen che tuba ina, wate cheta mawa rinchen dunden la, kyuwa meba chikun duwa she, tejin khamba yun la, de dun dans, khamba yun la de dun dans, chutin la subi dun tang denpa chuna denpa chusun deba ngata nuris deba nduwa shi che tang jambe tsa ju le chang loman de la chutin loman de la deban de la chutin nyang de la chuba chu me jins deba de la chutin nyang suna ngōru chūwa yōma, dīng yōma rī, chōng yōma rīs. Tēlā chūpa chū mē jīn, chūpa dīng yāng yōma tē, chūpa tamā yōma yīns. Sūtīng yāng sūna ngōru chū tāng dīng tāng, tamā sūngā yōma rīs. Sūtīng chē lā, tōngā kī, hān rūpa nī mā sūng tēs. Sūtīng chē bā lā, tōngā kī, 하게 주동 두모 모르르바데 소문도 쓰다 수진 제방 하발이 요아래 안 잡아 라준래 요아래 침발래 요들보다 네가 산탄도 수진 칠라 통하기 수진 제바 라준다 침발솔래 안에 샤자만 보다 통하기 한루바는 마송데스 하게 주동 두모 모르르 말송도 쓰 냥엔 대중 로아이 유당 수정 마이노 셰방야 반들라네 네 한루반 칼라유 주주진 체들라 들라 된도 칼라유 주진 시작은 된도 가네 요마르스 뭐뒤준 주진 레제메스 주진데 네 뭐뒤주 소레 주진 시작은 된도 요마르스 된도 칼라유 트레소야 제다 최대 트레소야 만조신 트레소야 타바도 타지셔 봐 ane dewa chuto mjudan jayu son bi hana ne ruban jo amche ku sheson bi sheros o tenma o naga chibudo ta
Sumba Bije Tambo Nipa Sumba Jiba Kab
nipa kondre lo nipa re somba kanu bas tenma re
Okay. Then it's good. Okay, so number 7 has 4 categories. So this is the first category. Given that maintaining the vows in such a way applies to one who has taken vows of individual liberation, it is also similar for one who practices the mantra vehicle. For the tantra requested by Sabha, who states that even householder practitioners of mantra must act in accordance with the text on discipline, except for matters concerning the marks, robes of renunciates, the ceremonial activities, and some factors which are merely regulatory. So it doesn't matter if one has gone forth or if one has not and is just merely a householder. It's necessary to keep this ethical discipline because it's something that's universal when it comes to beings and their goals of happiness in the future. Of the entire discipline that I, the Conqueror, taught, the pure ethical discipline of individual liberation, a householder practitioner of mantra should set aside the sign. Let me try that again. Of the entire discipline that I, the Conqueror, taught, the pure ethical discipline of individual liberation, a householder practitioner of mantra should set aside the signs and rituals and practice the rest. If this is the case, then it goes without saying that renunciates practitioners of mantra must act in accordance with the text on discipline. So here, the ethical discipline of the individual liberation becomes a foundational practice and necessary for the tantric practices. There's not some discarding in tantra of ethics that takes place. They actually become foundational and necessary as they are in all other vehicles to practice. And it says ethical discipline. If this is the case, then it goes without saying renunciate practitioners of mantra must act in accordance with the text on discipline. Ethical discipline is the root of practicing the mantra vehicle as well. The tantra requested by Sabahu states. So the first category among the 4 ends at the first, right past this first quote. It says, if this is the case, then it goes without saying, renunciate practitioners of mantra must act in accordance with the text on discipline. Number 2 starts, ethical discipline is the root of practicing mantra vehicle as well. The tantra requested by Sabahu says, the root of a mantra vehicle is, in the first place, ethical discipline. From it come joyous perseverance, patience, faith in the conqueror, the spirit of enlightenment, the mantra vehicle, and the absence of laziness. Just as the Lord, possessing the 7 treasures, tames all beings without disillusionment, so a mantra practitioner controls 7 when possessing these 7. So these are the 7 treasures of a mantric practitioner, beginning with the joyous perseverance, ethical discipline, joyous perseverance, and then patience, and then faith in the conqueror, the spirit of enlightenment, which is bodhicitta, the vehicle of mantra itself, and the absence of laziness, of lelo, no laziness. And then we find the root tantra of Manjushri. This is all in number 2. Number 2 ends at where Columba's quote is. And the root tantra of Manjushri says, if these persons who recite mantras spoil their ethical discipline, they would lose the highest of attainments, also middling attainments, and the least of attainments. So all attainments are lost. The small, medium, or great attainments are lost through discarding ethical discipline. The master of the sages, this is Buddha, does not say that faulty ethical discipline achieves the tantric path. Breaking ethical discipline is neither a situation nor a destination for those going to the city of nirvana. For those miserable children, where is the achievement of the tantric path? For beings who have faulty ethical discipline, where are the happy realms? Since they will attain neither high status nor the highest bliss, what need is there to speak of their attaining the knowledge of the mantra vehicle taught by the conqueror? So if someone who discards ethical discipline can't even be reborn in the higher realms of cyclic existence, what need is there to even talk about tantric achievements. Digson.
Oh yeah. Taniban Rosaro.
Soma
Ta somba tanma kanumba zetro.
That's up.
Kanumbi shene jang, magashonta na tanji, neji ten dons, neji ten don, tejin to tanji, chujinji ten to, koruku onyu, de lambojis, ane magashonta na nga zurumba na saa tonga meba ina, ane tanji neji ten to, nesa nga zo, bali palawa mariba, bali palawa siji yoro, di ten dons, what la to that need to Tejin to Tanji what the Chujin did the younger is Chujin the Abujuna and a Chibuchung landing la Chibishivilla Sama Yungres, Chujin Jitin to Koron you, the Lambonshis, Chujin Sazaji waters, Chujin Yabujumba Ina. Chibichung Lion with a dig lion with a Chibichimbi lion with a Dodang Ha Sama, what eat in Yungres, the Lambonshis, Chutin Yataba, Tabaya, Lende Masambala Mo use, Chutin Yataba, Lende Song, the Lende Masana, and the Chutin Tabayung matters. Mo you, Tena, December, Menga in Sombatans. December, the Tabinetu Sambate, Menga in Songores, Shara Ishene Jans, Kadam Gishin, Shara Ishene Jan, Lenye, Chishoyan, Chula Tembi, Ti Nane Jan, Doane, Juma Latena, Dajan Maguba, Shizama, Tatuba. Ne nyagawa tazan yin somba dans and doan somba na sujin di abu somba yina and yabu yo tembu yo somba yin sa marba na ne jan doan ne yong atar sujin di abu somba yina da jan maguba ne shitama sen ba zama ta tuba and nyagawa tazan tomazan patu zama Tamazon was a mero Zama in Sumba dance Geshe Tembi Sheneja don't by Jiro Tembi Sheneja Chenshi Duala Tene and Chenshiki Duala Tene Hanji Hala Tene Dua Janji Tesa Tang Hanya Lenchigan Suke Dunya Lenchigan Katan. Dunya Lenchigan, Hanya Lenchigan Katan dos. Then Dua Janji de Dua Haji Tru Handu Truso Suangai Lami Kaju Mebala Mason Vadans, take him Malia, Dunya Lenchigan to Hala Katan do, Hanya Lenchigan Suke, and then Dul Katan dos. Then Chuj Badan Adishatan, Brudun Jane, what the name Juba take what they can't do to Doan Haj Trus Joate, Nai Lami Juba Mabel Yomadres, Mabel Sombatans, what about the red? About the Sombat Doa.
Then the Joe J. the long.
Chuji Long to what the name Jibare.
Okay. Then, okay, so number 3 starts with Kulumba. When a famine occurs, everything depends on barley. So barley flour is kind of the basis of the diet. They make everything from barley flour. So it says everything depends on barley. In the same way, everything revolves around ethical discipline in the practice of the teaching. Therefore, apply yourself to this. Those who have not thought about karma and its effects will not achieve pure ethical discipline. Therefore, thinking about this is a personal imperative. So this is a personal instruction. You should think about karma and its results over and over again. And then it says, as Sharawa said, because if you think about karma and its results over and over again, it will encourage you to engage in ethical discipline. And Sharawa said, in general, whatever good or ill happens to you depends on religion, which depends on the Dharma. You could say there, Dharma. Moreover, within religion, if you depend on what the texts on discipline say, you will not even have to repeat things. You will be confidently pure, consistent, sure, and steadfast. So these are both Kadampa masters, and then we have the great Kadampa master Geshe Lharampa, who is Atisha's root disciple. One group holds that when you rely upon the discipline, you discard the practice of mantra, and that when you rely upon the mantra vehicle, you discard the rules of the discipline. The teaching that the discipline is the companion of the mantra vehicle and the mantra vehicle is the companion of the discipline exists only in my Guru Atisha's lineage. So this is showing how ethical discipline is indispensable even in the tantric vehicle. So that's number 3. And then we have a quote from Lord Atisha, which will be number 4. And it looks like we're ending because all the books are closed. So we'll end there today. Concluding mandala offering dedication prayer. Don't forget we have Mahayana one-day vows on Tuesday morning at 6:15 and a Guru Puja, and then Intro to Tibetan Buddhism, Source of All My Good, on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the Manjushri and likewise Samanta as well. Whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traversed the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful. Shwara Tenzin Yatso, we stay until samsara ends. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Rinpoche, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts, exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tu Jirum Chikuti Shepi Deno Nam Nasu